Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Using Evidence and Best Practice Programs to Improve Wellbeing. My name is Marketa Dresler, and I'll be your host and presenter for today's webinar. Also with me is another policy officer from the Commissioner's Office, Leanne Peck, who will speak a little bit later to you, and also Nola Allen from the State Library of Western Australia. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I'm sitting here today in Subiaco. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. Quickly, the program outline. I'll begin with just, a short overview of the role of the Commissioner. I'd then like to speak to you about the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework, mainly about its background, about the structure, and some of the key findings. At around 12:25, we'll have the guest presentation. I just mentioned that we've got Nola Allen here today from the Better Beginnings program. Nola will speak at just before 12:30, and at around 12:40 there'll be time for a Q&A session. I'll still be interrupting the presentation every 5 to 10 minutes to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. The Commissioner's work is governed by the Commissioner for Children and Young People Act 2006. The role is one of broad advocacy, representing the needs of all children and young people in Western Australia under the age of 18. In carrying out all her functions, the Commissioner must give priority to and have special regard for the interests and needs of Aboriginal children and young people, and children and young people who are vulnerable and disadvantaged for any reason. So you see that under the sections that I've listed on the slide. The Commissioner also is an independent statutory officer, and she reports directly to Parliament. The Commissioner's work must also have regard to the United Nations Conventions on the Right of the Child. This is the convention that sets out the rights to which every child is entitled. I'd like to speak to you briefly about some of the Commissioner's key responsibilities and as they relate to the work she's undertaken on the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework. So the work on the Wellbeing Framework relates to several of the Commissioner's key functions as these are set out in the Commissioner for Children and Young People Act. 3 sections in particular support and encourage the work in this area. These are Section 19C, promoting and monitoring the wellbeing of children and young people generally. There's also promoting public awareness and understanding of matters relating to the wellbeing of children and young people, and then conducting, coordinating, sponsoring, participating in, and promoting research into matters relating to the wellbeing of children and young people. We'll now move on to the background of the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework. When the Commissioner first established her role in 2007, she identified the absence of accessible and collated data on the wellbeing of children and young people in Western Australia. The difficulty in accessing comprehensive information and data on the wellbeing of children and young people impacts on identifying priority areas and gaps as well as planning. Reliable and robust data is essential for the process of monitoring and promoting the wellbeing of children and young people. It is important to know how the children in our state are faring. A collection of data which provides an overview of children and young people's wellbeing is therefore a vital starting point to improving the wellbeing, and one which many Australian jurisdictions had already implemented at the time. Over time, with such a data collection, we should be able to monitor both improvements and deteriorations. In regard to data, I'd like to make one important note here. In her conversations with service providers, the Commissioner often asks the question, is your program or service improving the wellbeing of children and young people? Often, agencies can report on the numbers of people, or particularly children and young people, that are using the service, but not always does it improve outcomes for children and young people. The Wellbeing Monitoring Framework reports on key wellbeing outcomes and also on how programs that have been included in the framework were found to be successful. Excuse me, I've got some messages coming up on my screen here. I'll just delete those. back to the data collection. So while an accessible data collection is the starting point to improving wellbeing, it is also important to look at the evidence of interventions that can be effective in improving these outcomes. An evidence-based approach is now recognised as crucial in the process of developing policies, programs and services that successfully improve wellbeing. Investment in best practice programs has been shown to make a difference. The Commissioner identified the absence of such information on best practice programs, again, when she first commenced her functions in 2007. And so she identified the absence, and again, it was programs that have been shown to be effective. Now, of course, this is not an easy or simple task. However, through the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework, the Commissioner hopes there can be a positive and constructive focus on strengthening and improving the wellbeing of children and young people in WA. I'd also like to mention that the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework was assisted by 2 reference groups. There was a specific reference group for 2 of the key publications, one for the state of WA's children and young people, and a particular reference group for the Building Blocks report. I'll put everybody back out of mute function.
The moderator has placed the conference into conversation mode. All participants are now unmuted.
Hello back, everybody. I've seen that we had a few people join in the last couple of minutes. Can I just get a feedback on whether everybody can hear and see okay?
Yep, everything's fine for me.
Everything's fine?
Mm-hmm.
Great, fantastic. So I'd like to say hello to those people that joined a little bit late. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Anything they'd like to add?
It's Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca.
Oh, hi. I would just like to know if I'm meant to be seeing a slide, because I've just got on my screen, it's loading slide 0 of 22.
Oh, does everybody else have a slideshow showing?
Yes, I see expected outcomes.
Okay. Can I have feedback from Jacinta? Can you see the slideshow?
Yep, I can see expected outcomes. Yep.
Samantha, Sana, can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
Sana's absent. Yeah. Rebecca, perhaps one thing for you to do, you could log out of the session and then log back in. Do you know what I mean? It could just be that in loading the slideshow, a sort of this, yeah.
Okay.
This one solution that often works. You could just log out of the webinar and then log back in and see if that improves.
Okay, sure. I'll give that a go. Bear with me.
Okay. Okay, and we'll just continue with the presentation then. I'll put everybody on mute again, and I'll continue with the expected outcomes of the framework.
The moderator has placed the conference into presentation mode. All participants are now muted.
So the expected outcomes of the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework, first and foremost, one outcome was a reputable, accessible and collated data resource. You can read that yourself on the slide. And this resource should outline key areas of children's wellbeing and show where improvement is needed. So specifically, in regard to this outcome, the report, The State of WA's Children and Young People, outlines reliable and robust data. And the data highlights the gaps in the wellbeing of children and young people, such as early childhood or the wellbeing of Aboriginal children and young people. This data assists in the analysis of where needs are for improvement and assists also in planning. A second outcome is information about best practice programs and services. Sorry, I just saw that someone mentioned it's much better audio, so I'm glad everybody can hear me now. So information about best practice programs and services that have been shown to improve wellbeing. Here I'm speaking about the Building Blocks report that provides information about best practice programs and services that have been shown to improve wellbeing. I'd like to note at this point, and that's very important, the Building Blocks report showcases a selection of programs, and the list is not exhaustive. The Commissioner likes to refer to it as a start, and as we'll go through further editions, this list will hopefully grow. Another outcome is information to assist in advocacy work, also information to support agencies in collaboration and improving service delivery, And finally, the framework should be seen as a tool or should be seen as providing tools that achieve improvement in the wellbeing of children and young people. I've put up just a tiny little slide with a cycle of how the Commissioner sees the relationship between data and information about programs. I'll just briefly take you through this. Obviously, very simplified cycle, but if you look at data at the top, so you look at wellbeing areas, and this could be health, this could be safety, education, material wellbeing. So you look at the data in regards to children and young people, and you can, through the data, identify the gaps in wellbeing, such as early childhood. I mentioned that earlier. So then you move on to program development, and when you're in, before you go about developing your program, you should engage in a lot of research, look at what other programs are out there, look at experience that other service providers would have made, engage in thorough planning, see to establish links with other program providers, and most importantly, avoid duplication. So there's a lot of research that goes into program development, a lot of planning as well. Once you've then developed your program and your program is off the ground and running, it is important to evaluate the effectiveness through outcome-based measures. So it is important to look at how many people access the service, but it is just as important to evaluate the effectiveness of this service. So we're looking at pre- and post-evaluation, for example. And then finally, you'd go back to your data and you'd be looking for improvement in that particular area that you are active in. And then I guess the cycle would be never-ending in that idea. So then the publications of the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework, so you could see with the data at the top, that's where the state of WA wellbeing, of WA's children and young people would give you the information. And when it comes to programs and what programs are already out there, the building blocks report would be the resource to go to. The Wellbeing Monitoring Framework in general is structured under 8 domains. These are those 8 domains that RACI established to report on the health and wellbeing of young Australians. You've got them on the slide, so these 8 domains that we've used are health and safety, education, material wellbeing, family and peer relationships, and so on. I'd like to mention that these domains are also used in other international reports, for example, in UNICEF's Innocenti report cards. So that makes comparison with other data sets, not only nationally but also internationally, a lot easier. The information that is presented in the 3 reports of the framework is structured under these 8 domains. So below you've got the little buttons. So the framework with its 3 reports, there's the profile of children and young people in WA. The profile basically is a statistical data collection that contains information on general demographics, such as how many children are there, not just in WA but in the individual regions. It also looks at information and data around diversity and social characteristics. This report was updated online only very recently, about 2 months ago in April 2013. So if you access the Commissioner's website, you can see an updated profile report. The information is presented both under topics, so you can look up, for example, population. You can look at the number of children and young people in particular regions of WA, but you can also search by map. So you can open up a map of WA, again with individual regions, and access information that way. The second report, you see that little green button on your slide in the bottom, the State of Western Australia's Children and Young People, is the report of measures and trends in the wellbeing. And a second edition is planned of this report in mid-2014, so roughly mid-next year. Same applies to the Building Blocks report. That's the Best and Promising Practice report. It details programs that have been demonstrated to be effective in addressing wellbeing. Again, a second edition is planned for mid-2014. All of these reports are available electronically via download and on our microsite. So if you access the Commissioner's website, you can access all these reports and this information. I'll show you at the end of the webinar how to get to all these resources. Now, I might take people off mute again. I'd like to know how many of you were aware of the frameworks before coming to the website.
The moderator has placed the conference into conversation mode. All participants are now unmuted.
Hello, everybody. Could I have feedback from a few people, just to show me how many people were aware of the report, so the framework in general?
No, from Sharamika Farah.
So, Sharamika Farah, you were aware, you have used these reports in the past and you're aware of them?
No, we haven't. There's 4 of us who were present in the webinar, and none of us were aware or have used it.
Of that, yep. Thank you for that. Pip saying not aware of all. Sana neither.
And I'm the same, Rebecca.
Rebecca? I think no from most people. No. Okay, I'll just do no for everybody. Wow, well, it's fantastic. I've got the right audience. That's beautiful. Okay, well, let's move on then.
The moderator has placed the conference into presentation mode. All participants are now muted.
Just like to give you a couple of examples of the type of information you'd find in some of these publications. So in the profile, you'd find information on the population of children and young people. I've mentioned that already briefly on the last slide. So it's just some key facts, and you'll be familiar with most of these, I expect. For example, we have things in there that say that Western Australia has the fastest growth rate of all Australian jurisdictions. I think this is now the 4th or 5th year that this has been the case. We've had a growth of 3.4% in the last year. And so when we look at the last 10 years, WA's population has increased by nearly 25%. Other information that's included is that there is around 560,000 children and young people under 18 in WA. And we also have information on the birth rate. So, for example, last year there were more than 32,000 births in WA. Similar to the population increase, the birth rate increased by over 34% in the last 10 years. Now, you would be wondering why is this, for example, important, but just if we look at birth data in particular, so with the profile, you can look up not only the birth rate for WA in general, but also for individual regions. And so if for instance, there's a particular number of births in a particular health region, say a region with a large Aboriginal community, and that this number of births represents a strong increase, as it would for most of the areas in WA, then this clearly shows that there is an increased demand for Aboriginal community health nurses and particularly child health nurses. So that's the sort of basic data that you need to make that assessment. Other information included in the profile relates to diversity. So for example, that there are around 31,000 Aboriginal children and young people, that 1 in 5 children are born overseas, that 17% of families in WA are single-parent families, and some of the impacts that is having. There's also information on the teenage fertility rate, which is higher in WA than the national rate. The profile also mentions that 1 in 3 Aboriginal children lives in an overcrowded home, and on homelessness we include information that, for example, 20,000 children are on the government's housing waiting list. So that was the types of information you would find in the profile report. The State of WA's Children and Young People is the report that was designed as an accessible and reputable data resource to incorporate measures of wellbeing. So again, if you recall those domains that I mentioned before, the 8 domains, so the measures are organised among those 8 domains. In order to develop the measures that were included, the project team drew ideas from existing frameworks. So that was mainly Victoria and Tasmania. They published some of the first frameworks and some of the first reports with measures on children's wellbeing. Some of the criteria for the measures, or the key criteria for the measures, I should say. First of all, the measures should be meaningful for researchers as well as users, and were possible for young people. The measures should be capable as far as possible of disaggregation. So by this I mean disaggregation by, for example, gender, by Aboriginal status, or by region of WA. The data collections should also be consistent and repeatable. So a number of otherwise excellent sources were ruled out for edition 1 because they were one-off studies and they didn't allow us to track changes over time or see the impact of developments such as interventions. In some cases, we chose sources with an eye for the future. The AEDI, the Australian Early Development Index, is a good example of that. At the time of publication of Edition 1, only one report or one AEDI survey had been run. By now, the second survey had been completed, so that is now a survey that's going to go into the future, and therefore it was included. The last criterion was that the measure should be capable of being influenced by action, whether of government or the private sector. The list of measures was finalised in close consultation with the reference group. I mentioned the reference group earlier, and resulted in a final group of 33 measures. And lastly, the Building Blocks Report. The Building Blocks Report is the third component of the framework, and it showcases the selection of programs that demonstrate best practice in strengthening the well-being of children and young people. The report was intended from the start to complement the other two reports. It identifies 82 programs categorised under the same 8 domains that I've discussed earlier. The Building Blocks Report can be called a companion report, and the Commissioner likes to refer to it as such. It is a companion report to the other reports in the framework, and while all these three work together, it is recommended, and the Commissioner recommends, that Building Blocks be read in conjunction with the State Report. The report is intended to be a practical document which increases access to evidence-based data and information concerning programs that improve the well-being of children and young people. The Commissioner contracted the Australian Institute of Family Studies after, of course, a competitive tender process to produce this report. And again, as mentioned previously, the list of programs that is included in Edition 1 is not comprehensive, but rather provides a selection of programs that the Australian Institute of Family Studies were able to identify in the timeframe and scope of this project. You could say that, in a sense, it is a start to collecting this type of information, and we already expect that with Edition 2, the list would have grown and there'll be more programs included. Finally, I'd like to mention that the programs that are included in Building Blocks shouldn't be cut and pasted, and it's not intended that this is the approach that anybody should take. Users should look at the successful elements of the programs that have been included and those programs that are relevant to them and their work. So now that we have looked at the background and the structure of the wellbeing monitoring framework, I would like to discuss with you how the reports can be used, and especially how the Commissioner uses them in her work. For this purpose, the Commissioner has identified 3 key findings that emerged from the framework. So firstly, let's look at the area of early childhood health and development. According to the AEDI, almost 1 in 4 WA children are developmentally vulnerable at the year they start school, a rate that is greater than the national average. One of the measures. Another measure says that nearly all babies in the metropolitan area receive a visit from a child health nurse, but that child health checkups, the attendance at child health checkups decreases. At the time the 3 to 4 month visit is due, the rates would have already fallen sharply, so much so that only 30% of children attend the 18 months health check, and only 9% attend the 3 to 3.5 year checkup. Also, immunisation rates, that's been in the media quite strongly in the last couple of weeks. Immunisation rates in WA are low compared to other states, and WA is only just meeting the minimum target of 90%. And again, if you see all this against the background of the birth increase that WA has had in the last 10 years, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I would like to introduce you now to Leanne Peck. Leanne is one of the Commissioner's most experienced policy team members, and she'll speak to you a little bit more about how the Commissioner has used the information of the framework, particularly in regard to early childhood health and development. Just hand over the phone.
Hello everybody, and just to reintroduce myself a bit more, I'm one of the Commissioner's policy staff with my areas of emphasis being mental health, early childhood and supporting parents. And the wellbeing monitoring framework is particularly helpful to my work, I have to say, because as you would be aware, the Commissioner has had early childhood as a priority since the earliest days of her appointment. At that time, she published an early childhood issues paper. That's nearly 5 years ago now, and there's been some movement in the area of early childhood in this state. However, when the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework State of WA's Children report was published, it was still very clear that there were significant gaps in young children's wellbeing, and but also that there were quite a number of programs that had been shown to improve young children's wellbeing. And if we return our minds to the little cycle that Keta drew up with the data, identifying the gaps in wellbeing, with the Commissioner knowing very clearly that those gaps still are present, then I could do the work on reviewing the research and looking at how that ties into the program. So the type of additional research and data that might be looked at is the information about the influences on various aspects of children's wellbeing. And in early childhood, it's clearly about brain development, about the importance of parents, the importance of attachment, and those sort of influences on young children's wellbeing. It also is about what is the latest research saying about the ways that services and programs can be provided to be effective. So the latest work from the Royal Children's Hospital about the effectiveness of integrated services, of international work on the importance of the universal provision of services to all children and young people, but that then a targeted approach is needed, and that by these combined approaches of universal and targeted, that there is a more effective impact on children's wellbeing. So that information and the information about which programs have been shown to work, including the ones in the WA context, like the Wyndham Early Learning Centre, has combined to for the Commissioner to really draw on that to publish her latest issues paper on early childhood, and for this to be the basis on which she makes her calls for improved services and programs, so that she's using the latest evidence from the profile about the increasing population of young children in the state, from the state of WA's children about the gaps that the AEDI is showing in children's development, and then about the best programs for improving children's wellbeing. And that's why the Commissioner in the issues paper makes call for universal programs like increased universal child health checks being available for all children and young people in WA, but that together with targeted intensive home visiting programs from nurses. And another example is the Better Beginnings program, is a universal program supporting parents to learn to be their child's first teacher. But in combination, for some groups, they might need a more targeted program like HIPPY. And although the Commissioner is working in the advocacy space, I think that all the reports working together can be of value for staff working in-service provision as well. So thank you. I'll take questions, I think, at the end.
Hello. Welcome back, everybody. I just quickly scanned through the messages just to check that no one's dropped off. With previous webinars, we've had problems that people would have dropped off halfway through. No, that's all looking great. Okay, now there's two more key findings that I'd like to briefly touch upon with you before then handing over to our guest presenter for today. After Leanne's segment on early childhood, another key area of the wellbeing monitoring framework are Aboriginal children and young people. And in a nutshell, the information in the framework confirms the ongoing disadvantage of Aboriginal children and young people across a range of wellbeing measures, if not pretty much all of them. So I've listed just a couple on the slide here. Early childhood health and development, as we've just heard, educational achievement, material wellbeing, overcrowding, contact with the justice system, and so on. Just to give you a couple of key facts that you would find in the state report, the disadvantage of Aboriginal children starts prior to birth, with the incidence of smoking during pregnancy significantly higher for Aboriginal women. So the stat here would be that 51% of Aboriginal women, of Aboriginal pregnant women, smoke, compared to 13% of non-Aboriginal pregnant women. Babies of Aboriginal mothers in WA are also more than twice as likely to be of low birth weight, and this continues to the stat that more than 1 in 2 Aboriginal children in WA is developmentally vulnerable on one or more domains. So now you can look up all of these stats and a lot more in the state report yourself. I'd just like to briefly explain to you how the Commissioner would use, again, the information from the framework. So the Commissioner has published 3 policy briefs on Aboriginal children and young people and their wellbeing. The policy briefs outline the data from the framework, and they describe what is being done in the area, and they use the building blocks report to identify what programs, services and projects work to improve the wellbeing of Aboriginal children. Just to mention a couple, some of the programs featured in building blocks are the Deadly Sister Girls program, the Clontarf Academy, again the Wyndham Early Learning Centre, or also the Scaffolding Literacy program. So I'd like to invite you to visit the Commissioner's website and look at these programs in more detail. The last key area that I'd like to look at with you is mental health. Now, we all know that mental health is a really important area of children and young people's wellbeing. In 2010, the Commissioner conducted the inquiry into the mental health and wellbeing of children and young people in WA, and the inquiry found that there was very limited, robust and reliable data available in the area of mental health of children and young people. The available data indicates that services are provided to around 20% of the children and young people who actually require them. As expected, the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework came to the same conclusion, namely that there was a lack of data in the mental health area. Since the inquiry and the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework, the Commissioner has continued to advocate for improvement in data collection and service delivery in this area. She's done this through various submissions and policy briefs. And again, she's used the inquiry report and she's used data and information from the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework. In view of the lack of good data, the Commissioner advocates for a strong focus on best practice programs. So Building Blocks features programs that improve the wellbeing in the mental health area, such as Kids Matter. I expect that many of you will be familiar with this program, or also Aussie Optimism, which is a social and emotional skills program for children. So mental health is a good example of how, given the limited available funding for programs and services, it is critical that when new funding becomes available, the programs that are implemented have evidence for both improving mental health and wellbeing outcomes and doing no harm. For this reason, the Commissioner continues to advocate for programs that have been found to make a difference to children's mental health and wellbeing. Now, we'll take everybody, we're pretty much at the end of the segment on the framework in particular. I will unmute everybody now for questions before we then move on to the guest presentation from Nola Allen.
The moderator has placed the conference into conversation mode. All participants are now unmuted.
Hello, welcome back everybody. You can speak now. If you have questions, you can either type them in the little message box or you can also just say them out loud. Are there any questions at this point? No one's coming forward at this stage. Any comments you'd like to make? Okay. In that case, I will hand over now to Nola Allen from the Better Beginnings program at the State Library of WA. Before I do that, I should bring up Nola's presentation. So I will just stop this one and you'll see a different presentation in a moment. There we are. That should be Nola's presentation.
Oh, and I can hear, yes. Thanks.
The moderator has placed the conference into presentation mode. All participants are now muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be part of this session with the Office of the Commissioner of Children and Young People. My name's Nola Allen and I'm the coordinator of the Better Beginnings Family Literacy Program. Just as an outline for my presentation, I'm going to just give a little bit of background about the program, its aims, its objectives, and some of the achievements to date, as well, just to provide some context for the program. But then I will actually be focusing on the key role that research has played in the development of the Better Beginnings program, but also the research that's been conducted by Edith Cowan University to evaluate the program, where Edith Cowan has not only looked at the effectiveness of Better Beginnings, but equally importantly, the evaluation has enabled us to further inform the development of the program and to also identify key areas of gaps of coverage within the Better Beginnings program. There is an absolute wealth of evidence from national and international studies that shows a significant connection between family literacy practices and school literacy achievement, where, and I'm sure you're also very familiar with the research, that parental involvement is vital to a child's success at school, and that one of the most effective ways of doing that is through targeted strategies and resources that actually encourage shared reading between parents and children. State Library of Western Australia looked at work that was being conducted overseas in the area of family literacy. In particular, we looked at the work that was being done in the UK through the Bookstart program, which started back in 1992. Bookstart was actually evaluated from the outset by the University of Roehampton, and we looked at the effectiveness of that program and the way that it had been conducted over a number of years. We also looked in particular at some work that was being done in the US, again, a service that was delivered through libraries and through GPs and doctors called Reach Out and Read. We looked at all of this work that was being done and saw an opportunity to develop a model that could work particularly in Western Australia. So based on this evidence and the significant body of research that's also been referred to earlier on around early brain development and of course the importance of the early years, the State Library developed the Better Beginnings program and piloted that program in just 6 communities back in 2004. From the outset, we recognised the need to evaluate. Edith Cowan actually conducted the evaluation of the pilot program, and based on the findings from the pilot program evaluation, the State Library was able to secure funding to actually roll out the program statewide, and we launched that in 2005. So Better Beginnings is a universal program. It's designed to support families and communities to build children's literacy skills, and the way that we are doing that is by supporting and encouraging parents to share stories, songs, rhymes with their children from birth. As I mentioned, the program has been developed with Western Australian conditions in mind. And also, while it is a universal program, over the development of the program, we have developed a number of targeted strategies and resources, but I'll speak about that a little bit later. Just a snapshot on how the program works. One of the key building blocks of the Better Beginnings program is the partnerships. They're absolutely fundamental to the program, and one of the key partnerships is between state and local government to provide public library services in Western Australia. It's quite a unique relationship across the whole of Australia. We have over 230 public libraries that deliver public library services across the state. So when we were looking at delivering a family literacy program, we acknowledged the opportunity at the existing infrastructure that exists already in WA. And of course acknowledging the geographical constraints that we have in this state, trying to make the program as accessible as possible to families right across the state. We saw this as an opportunity that we could use the program where we're connecting families with a service that is available year-round that actually supports reading and literacy. So through the Better Beginnings program, families with children with newborns and with children who are starting formal schooling, kindergarten and pre-primary, receive a Better Beginnings reading pack. And within that reading pack, you can see some photos of the reading packs in front of you. There's high quality Australian children's picture books included in the pack. There's print material for parents around reading tips, reading recommendations for age-appropriate books for their children, as well as literacy and reading activities that parents and children can actually do together. As I mentioned, the program's delivered in partnership, not only between the State Library and public libraries, but crucially with the partnerships that exist at local levels between community health centres and at schools. Since 2005, over 200,000 Western Australian families with new babies and toddlers have received books and reading packs through the program. They've also participated in rhyme and story time sessions in libraries and parent information sessions. There are a range of other resources that libraries receive as part of the program, and the resources range from discovery backpacks, which are intended for libraries to actually loan to families to continue that engagement with books. They include puppets and other resources and information for families. They include story time and rhyme time resources that libraries can use in-house to support sessions that they're running, but are also designed to be loaned to other community groups like playgroups or childcare centres for them to run their own sessions. The program for children turning 4 and 5 was launched in 2010, again after another pilot of the program and evaluated pilot at that. And so since 2010, over 78,000 young children turning 4 and 5 years of age have received their Better Beginnings reading packs through libraries and schools. Currently, in the second year of actually rolling this program out statewide, we have 347 primary schools across the state that have registered for the program. Better Beginnings is a program that's absolutely built on connections. It makes connections between research and practice. It makes connections between parents and children. It makes connections between families and communities. And some of the other connections I've already referred to are the critical partnerships that the program's founded on. The program's actually funded through a tripartite arrangement between state government, local governments, and with our founding corporate partner, Rio Tinto. State government funding also includes funding from the Department of Regional Development and Lands through royalties for regions, and that's enabled us to really try and consolidate the program in regional areas. Just to really reiterate the crucial nature of our partnerships, the Birth to 3 program wouldn't have the coverage that it has without the support of the health department, and in particular community health. And community health nurses, as the program's been rolled out, have often played an advocacy role for the program, where they've been working across a number of local government areas and in recognising if the program wasn't available in a particular community, talking to parents and lobbying for the Better Beginnings program there. In recent years, the State Library has established an MOU with the Department of Health, more specifically with Child and Adolescent Services and with WA Country Health, that actually recognises this joint delivery, where community health nurses are tasked to actually deliver the Better Beginnings reading packs and books to families by the 6-week check. I've also mentioned our program for children commencing school, and we have had the support of the Department of Education, as well as the Independent Schools Association of WA and Catholic Education Office, who have promoted the program to schools through their networks. While Better Beginnings Universal Approach has been a noted strength, and that comes through in all of the evaluation reports, the evaluation has also highlighted the fact that there are families that aren't accessing the program for a whole variety of reasons. One significant group of families are those families, those Aboriginal families living in remote communities across the state. Clearly, not every, very few remote communities have a public library service, so they're unable to access the program through the traditional universal forum. So we looked at a way of being able to increase that access to the program, as well as looking at the resources that we're delivering to families in communities. And we developed a range of very targeted resources, and then have approached communities through community councils, inviting them to be involved in the program. If a council is interested and agrees to participate in the program, they nominate someone, a community contact person, who is responsible for delivering and following up on the Better Beginnings program with families in the community. Just a snapshot of some of the resources that are in these packs. It's actually a 2-year commitment with communities who join the program. Families receive an initial reading pack, which includes culturally appropriate books. Many of the books are published by Indigenous publishers, including Magabala Books here in WA. There's a T-shirt with the explicit messaging, "Read to me, I love it." There is a DVD with readings of the books, so modelling readings of the books that the children receive in their packs. There's also print material, including phonics and alphabet posters. There's the Koori Mail, a newspaper for adults, again reinforcing the importance of modelling reading and the value of reading for families. As I mentioned, the Better Beginnings program, the evaluation of the Better Beginnings program has been critical to the program in a number of ways. We need to know if the program's working, if its implementation is effective. We need to communicate the progress of the program to our partners, and we need to know how we can continually improve and respond to changing conditions and further develop the program to keep it relevant. As I mentioned, the pilot program evaluation was actually vital to our securing funding for both initial and ongoing funding for the program that's led to the statewide rollout of the Birth to 3 and now the program for 4 and 5-year-olds. The longitudinal evaluation actually measures the effectiveness of Better Beginnings from the perspectives of the practitioners as well as the participants, the parents. Edith Cowan University initially evaluated the program in 4 discrete communities in WA, and they've looked at the impact of the program, how it's influenced the book sharing practices, the attitudes, the beliefs that parents have about sharing books with their children from birth, from the very beginning. Sorry, just hopping back from slides here. Here are just some of the findings from the most recent evaluation, this has resulted from researchers who have revisited families who first participated in Better Beginnings back in 2007. It's demonstrating that the program continues to have a positive effect, with parents establishing a range of effective book sharing practices and children developing early literacy behaviours that are going to help them with their learning to read and write. The study also shows that Better Beginnings has reinforced and extended parents' knowledge and beliefs and provided new understandings and practices that have been sustained over time. So as I mentioned, while the evaluation has demonstrated and documented the program's effectiveness, it's also critically informed program development from the outset with the pilot evaluation, feedback from parents about some of the books that were included in the reading packs not being culturally appropriate, books that weren't actually reflective of WA or the cultural diversity within Western Australia. Parents also commented on some of the information that was included in the print materials, and particularly around the format, the way that materials were presented. We took that information feedback on board and re-looked at the materials and the way that we presented information, and it also led to the development of some locally developed and published books that we've included in the reading packs for families. I've already mentioned the program identified gaps in the coverage, those families that haven't been able to access the Better Beginnings programs for a various number of reasons. I mentioned families that don't access perhaps mainstream health or education or community services, and particularly over the life of the program, what we've been able to do is actually link with those specialist organisations, both government and non-government, who are delivering very targeted services to those families. And so while the program's universal, it's making links with those organisations that have the expertise, the relationships and the knowledge to work with families that may not be accessing the program in the traditional ways. We're doing work in the Great Southern with organisations like Wansley. We're working with the YMCA, again around in the Great Southern, looking at jointly delivering a locally developed program, a Smart Start, jointly in collaboration with the Better Beginnings program. We're working with Derbyl Yerrigan Aboriginal Health Service in some of its sites in the metro area, again for families who visit this health service, and providing reading packs in this way. We've also been doing some work just with Central TAFE and with the Adult Migrant Education Program, so for newly arrived migrants as part of the settlement program who are attending English language and literacy classes. There's a creche that's provided as part of this, and we've been able to work and collaborate with them and provide them with reading packs and other resources that can actually support parents' literacy skill development through that connection of being able to read books and share books with their children. And currently, we're actually doing some work after being approached by education staff with the Department of Corrective Services. That's through a pilot that we conducted around developing adult literacy and adult reader developments itself, where we've worked with Read Right Now, an adult literacy provider, and then Department of Corrective Services, who are very interested in making connections between the resources that we're able to provide, making that as a stimulus for parents, for men and women in the prison system to support and encourage them to develop their literacy, to be able to share books with their children. Just in closing, I'd invite you to visit the Better Beginnings website, where you can find more detail about the program. There's a host of resources that you can access, and for those of you who are practitioners working in health, working in education, working in communities and libraries, you can register as a practitioner and access the handbooks and guides and other support material that we have available. And of course, there are the reports, the evaluation reports that have been published by Edith Cowan that are available there. Thanks very much.
Hello again, everybody. Now, I have to apologise right away. We are running a little bit over time. We're just approaching 1 o'clock. I think probably the last segment of the presentation will be another 5 minutes, and then there'll be time again for questions and answers. So it's fantastic to see that all of you are still here. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Just bringing up CCYP's presentation again. And I will scroll through to the back.
The moderator has placed the conference into conversation mode. All participants are now unmuted.
No, you should be able to speak as well. So I'd like to give you just a little bit more information on how to access the Commissioner's website and to show you what the website actually looks like. The Commissioner developed microsites for all 3 reports of the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework. And if you just want to try this with me, if you hover your mouse over the hyperlink that you see on the slide in front of you, the slide How to Access the Website, if you click on that, the Commissioner's website should open up for you. Was that working for everybody?
Yep.
Yep. Fantastic. Okay. So if you're on the Commissioner's website, on the right-hand side, right-hand bottom, there's a purple button, blue, the purple one speaking out about disability, then Commissioner's events, and underneath that you'll find a light purple button, the Wellbeing Monitoring Framework. So everybody just wants to click on that one.
Oh, did I mess up?
What opens up is the website of the framework, and if you scroll down, you'll get these 3 buttons again. So there's one individual button for the profile, there's one for the state of Western Australia's children and young people, and one for building blocks. So I can't guide you through this, but for example, if you want to hover your mouse or your little hand over the profile, another landing page opens up, and at the bottom it says you can search by map or you can search by topic. So I'd like to invite you to have a look at this perhaps later today after this webinar. Information can be accessed through the map, or you can simply search by a particular topic that is of interest to you. If you go back to the starting page where you again see all the 3 buttons, and we'll click on the state of Western Australia's children and young people, you should then see the 8 domains come up. So on the left-hand side, you can view the domain, so you can search the measures and the data information that is available under these 8 domains. Or on the right-hand side, you can simply download the entire report. The building blocks page is structured in the very same way. So again, if you open up the building blocks report through the building blocks button on the left-hand side, you can search under domains. So the programs will come up as they relate to that particular domain, or you can download the entire report. Perhaps one thing to mention in regard to the programs, it's not always that clean cut, so there may be programs that relate to a number of domains. The Australian Institute for Family Studies obviously would have had to make a decision on which domain to put a particular program under, but you will find in the program description other domains that this program may relate to. So if you can't find something in one domain, it may well be listed in another related domain. Now I'll go back to the main slide, and that's pretty much all from our end. I've just put up the contact details. If you have any questions about the webinar, by all means, please email info@ccyp.wa.gov.au. Also, most of you should have my email address. I'm also very happy to receive all your queries. There's a phone number, free call. The Commissioner is also now on Twitter. So if you're interested to follow the Commissioner, you've got all the details here on the slide. Does anybody have any questions at this point that they'd like to ask? If no, then I'd like to make one last comment. I will be emailing you after this webinar with an evaluation form. We'd really appreciate your feedback on today's webinar. It looks at the content, and just also if you could provide some information about the technical delivery, if you had issues with audio or video, we'd really appreciate that feedback from you. So I'd like to thank our guest speaker for today, Nola Allen, and I'd like you for attending the webinar and also for your patience with us running 15 minutes over time. So from us here in Subiaco, goodbye.